This is a story about you and me.
Our parents, our friends, our grandparents,
our cousins, our padrinos,
our brothers, our sisters,
our past,
our present,
our future.
This is a
Mexican family story.
Wars don't give a damn about who you are. They don't care where you were born, what language you speak, or what dreams you had before the first shot was fired. The U.S. Civil War was no different. It was supposed to be a fight between North and South, between industry and plantations, between the idea of America and the reality of it. But wars have a way of pulling in people who never expected to be there. People on the fringes, people caught in the crossfire, people who saw an opportunity or just no other choice. Mexicans fought in the U.S. Civil War, thousands of them. Some were born in Texas, California, New Mexico, places that had been Mexico just a generation before. Others crossed the border to join the fight, drawn by promises, politics, or just the unshakable instinct that in times of chaos, you pick a side and hope for the best. Some fought for the Union, some for the Confederacy, and like everything in history, the truth is messier than we like to admit. This is their story. To understand why Mexicans ended up fighting in the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history, you have to rewind a little. The U.S. had just finished swallowing half of Mexico. Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, land that had been Mexican for centuries, was suddenly American after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. The people who lived there didn't disappear. They just woke up one day under a new flag. Some embraced it, some resisted. Most just tried to survive. In places like Texas and California, Mexicans were second-class citizens. Their land was stolen, their rights ignored, their culture looked down upon by the flood of Anglo settlers moving west. But they were still there, woven into the land, shaping its identity whether the U.S. liked it or not. And then came the Civil War. The Union Army had no shortage of supplies, but it needed men, lots of them. Among the ranks were thousands of Mexicans, many of them from Texas and California. Some joined because they believed in the cause. Others joined because, let's be honest, a steady paycheck and the promise of a better life was a hell of a motivator. One of the most famous Mexican-American soldiers was Santos Benavides, a former Mexican military officer turned Texan politician. He was a Confederate, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's talk about the Union men. California, which had been part of Mexico just 15 years earlier, sent the California Column, a unit that included many Mexican Americans. These were tough, sunburned men used to life on horseback, trained in desert warfare long before the U.S. Army figured it out. Their main job? Keep the Confederacy the hell out of the Southwest. They marched across Arizona, New Mexico, and West Texas, fighting off Confederate sympathizers and making sure that the South stream of expanding slavery westward died in the dust. One of the biggest battles they fought in was the Battle of Glorieta Pass in New Mexico, sometimes called the Gettysburg of the West. A mixed-race Union force, including Mexicans from the 2nd New Mexico Volunteer Infantry, utterly crushed the Confederate invasion of the territory. It was brutal, it was messy, and it ensured that the Southwest would stay in Union hands. Mexican Texans, or Tejanos, were in a strange position. Texas was Confederate territory, but not all of them supported the South. Many still had deep roots in Mexico, a country that had outlawed slavery decades earlier. Fighting for the Union was a way to push back against the white supremacist power structure that had turned Texas into a hostile place for Mexicans. Some fled south into Mexico and joined Benito Juárez's army against the French, who had taken over Mexico during the Civil War because, apparently, one war at a time wasn't enough. Others crossed into Union-held Louisiana and joined the fight there. Then there were the ones who stayed in Texas and became guerrillas, raiding Confederate supply lines, hiding Union sympathizers, making life hell for the secessionists in their own backyard. Not every Mexican fought for the Union. Some sided with the Confederacy, either out of loyalty to Texas, a hatred of the U.S. government, or just the simple fact that when war breaks out, people tend to fight for the place they call home, even if it doesn't love them back. As mentioned earlier, the most famous was Colonel Santos Benavides, the highest-ranking Mexican-American officer in the Confederate Army. Benavides wasn't fighting for slavery. He didn't own slaves. And like many Mexicans, he probably wasn't too thrilled with the idea of white supremacy running unchecked. But he was a Texan, and he saw the Union as the bigger enemy. Maybe because the U.S. government had been screwing over Mexicans in Texas for decades. He led the 33rd Texas Cavalry Regiment, a unit made up of mostly Tejanos, and spent most of the war keeping Union forces out of South Texas. His biggest claim to fame? Defending Laredo from a Union attack in 1864. Outnumbered and outgunned, he still managed to hold the town. But here's the irony. While he was fighting for the Confederacy, his family back in Mexico was fighting against the French invasion. War doesn't care about your contradictions. It just eats up men and spits them out. While Mexican Americans were bleeding on U.S. soil, Mexico itself was a whole other mess. The French, under Napoleon III, had taken over the country and installed Maximilian I, an Austrian puppet emperor. Benito Juarez, Mexico's legitimate president, was fighting a guerrilla war to take his country back. And guess what? The U.S. Civil War and Mexico's war against the French were tangled together like barbed wire. The Confederacy tried to use Mexico as a backdoor for trade, smuggling cotton through ports like Matamoros to avoid the Union blockade. Meanwhile, Juarez and Lincoln had a quiet understanding. If the Union won, the U.S. would finally help Mexico get rid of the French. And that's exactly what happened. The Civil War ended in 1865, and right after, thousands of Mexican-American veterans crossed the border to join Juarez's army. The French were defeated by 1867. War never really ends. It just moves locations. So what did it all mean? Mexicans fought on both sides of the Civil War. Some for ideals, some for money, some because history put them in a place where they had to pick a side. But they were there, riding into battle under both the Stars and Stripes and the Stars and Bars. After the war, Mexican-American veterans were largely forgotten. They didn't get statues. They didn't get history books written about them. But they helped shape the outcome of the war, keeping the Southwest in Union hands and ensuring the Confederacy never had a real foothold in Mexico. Their descendants are still here, some waving American flags, some still fighting against the system that never fully accepted them. History doesn't always remember the people on the margins, but if you listen closely, you can still hear them, riding through the desert, caught between two nations, two wars, and a fate that was never really theirs to choose.